Day and welcome to our talk show. We are so happy that you're joining us today. Just a heads up, if you have any questions, feel free to send them to Slido using the code #AFG Pulse. Today we're going to be talking about excelling in leadership, especially in terms of the youth and nowadays. My name is Ebon Ajay and I attend City of David here. Leadership is something that's really been a part of my DNA for a long time, and it's all culminated in me becoming my school's first African American student body president in high school, and now I run a tutoring business. All right, so will you guys please introduce yourselves also? Starting with you, Faith.
Hi, my name is Faith Amoda. I'm currently a student and I'm involved with the youth ministry here at City of David.
Awesome, thank you, Toby.
Hi, my name is Toby Ilutila. I'm currently a sophomore in college, and I'm a leader here. I work with the Dunamis children with Antidata.
And you?
Hi, my name is Dr. Kiki Diogu. I'm a physician and I'm also a business leader.
Hi, my name is Tola Emmanuel. I'm a healthcare professional, a wife and a mom, and I currently serve also in the young adult and singles ministry called Infinity here in City of David.
Awesome, thank you so much. It's really great to meet everyone. We're so excited to get started. So first off, we hear so much about this term leadership, leader this, leader that, in charge, position, power. What exactly is leadership? Auntie Tal, I'll start with you. What do you think that leadership is?
Okay, that's a great question because leadership everywhere. So I believe that leadership is mostly about influence. Okay, it's a form of social influence where you influence other people and encourage them to maximize their gifts, all to accomplish a goal.
And you know, nowadays we have a really aggressive and competitive society. Do you think there's still a place for servant leadership in the midst of all of that?
Oh, definitely. I think more than ever before, there's actually a need for servant leadership because especially the younger generation, people are looking for relationships and communities. And the servant leadership has those attributes where you're relational, you're approachable, and people basically can just relate with you. I guess the term is relational.
Right.
So more than ever before in this era, we need more servant leaders to involve themselves and to invest their time and resources in developing, young leaders.
Thank you. You know, I really like you talked about those relationships and these attributes that leaders have. And so I think that in terms of leadership, a lot of us want to be leaders, but sometimes we wonder, do we have what it takes? And that brings us to this question of nature versus nurture. Is leadership something that is your nature, that you're just born into it, you're naturally a leader, or is it something that you think can be developed and grown and you just nurtured into becoming a leader? Kiki, will you talk about that a little bit? What do you think about nature versus nurture?
Sure. When it comes to leadership, it's something that, I've heard so many times people say, I was born a leader. Personally, my perspective is I don't think anyone is really born a leader. However, genetically, there are people that are born with certain traits that make it easier, if I should say, for you to step into leadership roles. However, you may be born with those traits, but still never become a leader because you never step up and step into that role of being a leader. Likewise, there are people who may not be born with what we would consider leadership traits, but they can hone those skills with training, with mentorship, and grow into a role as a leader.
Right, and thank you for that. That's really, really profound. And Faith, you're younger and you're a leader also. Do you think it's something that you're born with, something you've developed, a mixture of both? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I actually agree with Kiki. I grew up a naturally afraid person. I was always that kid that was like in the corner of the room. You never see me talking. So even the fact that I'm here is by the grace of God.
Right.
And it took a long time for me to get to this point through training. I was in this thing in high school called GSLT. It was the Gwinnett Student Leadership Team. And we used to go to sessions and we'll meet with like leaders in the community. And at the time I thought it was stupid, even though I did it for like college and all that kind of stuff. But looking back now, I think that was a huge part of my transformation.
Right, that's awesome, that transformation. I think that transformation is key, that even if you're not born with it, you can grow and develop and transform into that leader. And getting back to what you're talking about growing up as a leader in high school, tell me about some of your mistakes of leadership and how you overcame them.
Yeah, the biggest one for me was dealing with conflict. And one thing I learned really quickly was to apologize. Like, an apology goes a long way. There was an incident, even here, I had an altercation, not really altercation, but when you say something, it comes across, different than you intended.
Right.
And I remember people were looking at me in the room like, what is wrong with her, kind of thing. And I remember I went home, I was evaluating my actions that day, and I actually sent an apology out to every single person. I apologized for how I acted in that room. And I made sure that whatever happened that day didn't go into the next day. And the Bible talks about that, not making sure that you don't go down, the sun doesn't go down when you're angry. So that's one important part.
Right, and that must be scary, being in the limelight and having to deal with these issues. And one thing I would say, though, and something that I've also experienced, is that this conflict can create change. That, I think a lot of times the big thing that's scary about leadership is having to deal with any sort of issues, but when we handle them the right way, and that's part of us growing as leaders, when we handle those things the right way, it creates a lot of beautiful change. So thank you for sharing that experience. Now, Kiki, you lead an organization that started way before you got into your 30s. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience with that? What were your fears? How did you grow from that? Tell me about your organization.
Sure. So I've started a couple of organizations, but
wow, that's awesome.
And I'm also part of the leadership at another medical device company here in Atlanta. I serve as a vice president of clinical operations.
Wow.
But for me, the very first one was Kiki Prep. It's my tutoring organization, and I started that out of my passion for teaching. I've always loved teaching. Right from high school through college, medical school, I love to tutor my peers. So I figured, well, I could, monetize this and make some money out of it and start a business. Getting into it, the biggest fear for me was the fear of failure. And I realized that a lot of times that's what we're so scared of is, what if I fail and put myself out there and everyone is going to talk about it and, and all that kind of stuff. But at some point, I had to take that bold step and take it one day at a time. And I had to realize along the way and learn that, failure is, the way we in the world tend to describe failure, we make it seem so finite. But it's not. It's a step. It's a development process. So I never looked at any setback as a failure. I just looked at it as an opportunity to learn, to get better, and you keep pushing, you keep growing, and that was it for me.
So you pushed through all of those failures and that fear, you pushed through and really kept going.
Yes.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Toby. Have you had any experiences like that where maybe you're afraid of failing or you did fail, but it helped change you, help you become the leader that you are today?
Thanks for the question, Evelyn.
Of course.
Honestly, failure is always a thing that people look at that they think will hold them back.
Right.
But honestly, failure only just makes you stronger.
Yeah.
Say you take a test, right, and you fail the test. If I fail a test, I know that's only going to make me try to get a better grade, not just, to give pride to my family, but to also make me proud and make me feel like a leader, to make me feel smart so I can try to be better in the future.
Right.
Honestly, failure is just one step in helping you become the best leader that you can be.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that fear is something that, we all have it. And I personally think that this whole notion of being fearless is kind of overrated because we're all born with fear. I mean, think about it. If you see a lion run at you and you don't run away, that's an issue. You're supposed to have that fear. But when it talks about failure, in terms of failure and things like that, I think what matters is the role we allow fear to play in our life. Do we have fear and it paralyzes us? We can't do anything because of it? Or do we push through despite that fear? You have something to say about that, Auntie?
Yes, I do. There's this saying, it's very popular, that I actually live by, that failing is not the falling down,
right,
but the staying down.
Right.
So as long as, whatever it is, you fall, but you get up and you keep going, that's not necessarily failure. It's like the staying down and not, the rising up.
Right, yes, that's profound. Thank you, because we're going to have that fear, but we have to be able to get back up. We have to be able to keep pushing through, and that's what makes those great leaders. They're not just born that way. They've pushed through and persevered through all of these hard times. And talking about fear and failure, there's a lot of us that have these perceived disadvantages in terms of leadership, that maybe we're a minority in different areas, and these disadvantages somewhat hold us back in a sense. Like, it can really become paralyzing. If you're a young female in our modern society, How has that played a role in your leadership style, the way you perceive it, your mindsets? Tell me about that.
That's a good question. I have so many stories I can talk about for days. The biggest thing I've tried to not let that get to me. I feel like it's a double whammy. You're a woman and then you're young, especially being in leadership in an African church where respect is very like, you see an adult, you respect an adult, and then as a woman too. I've had instances where like I speak up in a meeting and somebody would tell me like, why'd you have to say that? You should have been quiet. Let all the adults in the room speak. Or you're too aggressive. Or as a woman, when you come into a room and you're commanding the room, they start calling you bossy. And I like for as long as I can remember, that word has always had a negative connotation for me. But I've accepted it. I'm like, yeah, I'm bossy, but I get things done, right? So that's kind of like what I've taken that kind of mindset into leadership. I don't let it get to me as much anymore. I just apologize, move on, keep going. But yeah, there's really nothing you can do. You have to persevere. That's literally it. Yeah.
Right. That's amazing. Perseverance, I think that's the key word and the key element, all of that. And for you, Tala, that you're a mom too. You're not only a woman and in this culture, you're a mom. How has that played a role in your leadership?
Well, before I was a mom, just very similar to Faith. You're young, you have all these ideas, you come up with all these inspirations. Because you're able to pick out maybe like challenge areas, and you produce solutions and all, and then it depends on who takes them or who doesn't take them.
Right.
It used to be really frustrating, at the time, and then I just had to get to the point where I was like, well, I'll do my best. Whatever is accepted, it's good. Whatever is not accepted, that's good. And because I also moved around a little bit, so I went to different churches and experienced different, styles of leadership. So I always had to also adapt and adjust to where I found myself. Now, as a mom, of course, that's different. It's so funny you said that. I see myself applying my leadership skills in a different way, leading these two strong-willed women that are just under 5 years of age. I know it may sound, funny, but I take the responsibility seriously. So that means that whatever I do, whatever I say, so not only just leading in my home, in parenting, but also leading in the place where I serve. So it's just something that you just find your balance of worth. You do not lose your value, your worth, and then you produce results by being persistent.
Thank you for mentioning, value and worth, because we are all born with some sort of value, some sort of worth. We all have that inside of us, but we have to learn how to channel it. And I think that one thing that really plays a role and holds us back, especially in our generation, in terms of expressing that value and worth, is the perception that, what are other people going to think of me if I walk into that room and I'm that young woman leading things? They're going to think I'm boss, they're going to think I'm this. What are those perceptions going to be? Toby, how has that played a role in you? How have you learned to overcome perceptions, and how has that strengthened you as a leader?
Thank you. I honestly think that things like negative connotations and things like that really shouldn't hold you back from being a leader. If anything, things like that and titles, they should help you to become stronger.
Right.
Because that will make me want to prove to people that you're not that person that you say they are. You're better than that. And once they see you as that, they see you, oh, he's actually a leader. He can actually do this. And that'll let them want to follow you and show how you can guide them towards success.
Right. And Faith, you wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, I also, one thing is to remember your why, of why you started. I actually had I call them episodes, but it was like a leadership episode where I broke down crying. And at that moment, I was like, what's the point? What's the point of doing all of this if you keep getting attacked and, people keep beating you down? And then God reminded me about my why I committed to this. I was like, well, if I leave, what would happen to the people that I said yes to?
Right.
So it's always remembering you didn't come here for the naysayers. You came for the people that support you and the change you want to see. So that's very important to remember the why. And always have a why before you go into any kind of leadership, because that drives your passion in the bad days.
That why is extremely important. And I just want to say this to anyone, especially younger people who are watching this, about leadership, and you're afraid because of all these perceptions. The truth is, when you're a leader, when people are looking at you, not everyone's going to like you, and it's something that you're going to have to overcome. And I think that's probably the biggest lesson that I learned from student government in high school, is that it's not always going to be easy, but if you remember that why, and if you remember why you're there and what you're doing everything for, it becomes suddenly worth it. That after all of those hard times are just a small little picture in the larger picture of all the good and the change that can come from it. So thank you for talking about that, because I think that's probably one of the biggest things that holds us back, is that what are my friends going to think? What is the world going to think? Am I not going to be liked because of this? Am I not going to be as cool? Because we all have that want. We all have that need to be loved and be valued, but we just have to keep pushing through and have that why and that reason. Switching gears a little bit, I think that in terms of leadership, we also sometimes look for this title. We want to have that name and that power and that position, but not all of us have it. Toby, do you think that you have to have a title to become a leader? Tell me about that.
You really don't need to have a title to become a leader. Everyone starts at their own pace, and you can see through the kind of person they want to grow into. Take all of us, for example. None of us really started out without a title.
Right.
But look at where we are now. We're successful. We've all reached some point in our life where people look up to us. People try to follow us. They see us as perfect leaders.
Right.
I know me, for example. I was just this small kid, this shy kid that really didn't do anything. Used to sit in the back of the classroom, and now I'm a sophomore in college at one of the best schools in the country.
Awesome.
My brother looks up to me, many people look up to me, and I feel proud because of that. And I didn't start off with a title. If you let something as small as a title hold you back, then you can't really lead anyone, let alone lead yourself.
That was amazing. And Kiki, you've had some titles. The organizations, tell me a little bit about how that's worked. And he talked about not having a title. You've had that. You've probably started a place where you didn't have that. Can you tell me about your perspective and your take on this?
Sure. To add to Toby's point, you don't need the title to be a leader.
Right.
There's something I always say, that leadership and management are not quite exactly the same. You may not have the title of a manager or senior director or something, but in whatever you're doing, you could be a leader that influences people around you to achieve a certain goal. In the corporate organizational structure, a lot of times you could find yourself in a situation where your leadership then brings on the title. For myself personally, my personal growth, I started out in an organization where I didn't really have the high titles, but my leadership skills became apparent, and at that point, the executive management decided to bring me up to a leadership role or a management role because they had seen my abilities. So that's different a lot of times, where you have people, for other reasons, could be given titles and asked to lead, and they don't really have any leadership abilities. So in that kind of scenario, you're setting yourself up for failure, because you're not going to achieve the goals that you want to achieve.
Right. So what I hear from you is that there's kind of this caveat in the sense that you don't have to have a title to be a leader, but there is some sort of value to having a title if you're a proper leader, right? Would you agree with that?
Well, I'll agree with that to a certain extent, because especially in the corporate structure, the title brings the ability for others to really follow.
Okay.
And that's about it. But there are times when you may not have a title, but based on your relationships with people, the way you interact with people, the way you influence them, the way you motivate them, you can still get people to follow you to achieve a task, even without a title. So even, it may just be people within the same group. It could be in school, you could have your peers within the same group with you, but even without being given a title, your peers identify you as, this is our leader within this group unofficially.
Right. And you want to touch on that?
Yes, I just want to touch on what he said. So what he's trying to say is the sphere of influence. So when we look at leadership as influence, so be it maybe a sibling or a colleague or a loved one or a friend, it's just, the title is not what really defines the leader. As long as you're having some sort of influence on somebody else, and the sphere of influence differs from person to person. Some people have larger, spheres, some people have smaller spheres, and it's also seasonal. So leadership is not necessarily only about your title or position.
Thank you. And I think that's really important. And the reason why I ask this is because, again, you can be a leader without having that title. But there is there is a higher platform that comes from some of those titles. And so sometimes we see a lot of people who want to get to that higher position, whether it's corporate America, whether it's in government, whether it's just in the realms of our society, but they're struggling to get to those higher positions because, again, you see things happening in our society, you want to make change, and it requires a lot of numbers, but you also have to have some sort of power too. What do you have to say, Kiki, to people who are trying to get there but are struggling, having a hard time getting to those places to really enact and create change?
Yeah, what I'll say to those people is, well, first of all, just like Faith talked about, you have to ask yourself, what's the why? Why do you want that title? Why do you want to get there? A lot of us want to get those titles so we can act like we're better than other people. You know, it comes back to servant leadership. You know, if you want the title, if you want to go for a role, at the underline as a Christian, at the core of it, it should be, I want this so I can effect a positive social change.
Right.
And, you know, personally, I believe if your heart is right and your why is right, and you put God at the center of it, and you do all the things that are necessary to get to that point, it's a process, but you have to be diligent. You have to put in the hard work, and, you know, with time, you could go step after step and you get to that place. And very importantly, when you get there, you can't forget why you got there or why God has put you there. God, you know, creates leaders. God puts people in also management positions. God gives people these titles for specific reasons. You know, so if you were to get there, you can't forget there's a reason why I'm here. You have to ask yourself that from day one. What does God want me to do here? For example, the company that I work at, you know, when I got there and I started growing and the titles came along, you know, I had to ask myself, and I said, you know, why does God want this for me? Because there were times I looked at it and I said, I don't really deserve to move this fast. You know, there's a roles reserved for like people that are much older, experienced, you know, and I told myself there's a reason why God wants me here. And I had to find that reason, that purpose, and I realized that God wanted me to bring about a certain kind of change in that environment. So every day, that's been my purpose is, if I stay here, if I leave here, I want to accomplish what God wants me to accomplish here.
Right. So what I hear from you, what I think the biggest idea they're trying to sum up with this is that you have this purpose, you have this reason why you're here. You might have a vision of getting somewhere higher. Where you are now, be diligent here. Plant and sow here. Do your best here. And every day is a step towards that higher position. After all, Moses he wandered the desert for 40 years, leading that small area before he became the king, before he got higher. Oh no, is that the wrong example? Okay. All right. I'm so sorry. Okay, so so our dominant culture seems to put a barrier on young leaders, talking about trying to get to these higher levels. We put a barrier on these young leaders. What would you have to say to them to encourage us to get higher?
I'll just tell young people not to be discouraged. Of course, as long as you're constantly working on your value system, your visions, you know, your why, you know, you just be persistent, be consistent, and be reliable. Because eventually this will produce results that will earn you the respect of other people. You know, remember, respect is earned, not demanded. So when the results come, they follow through, whatever level you are at, eventually earns you the respect. And slowly but surely, in your persistency, consistency, and reliability, you get to where you're going to. So I just say, you know, keep your head up and just keep going.
Thank you. Thank you. So now I want to turn gears a little bit back to that whole notion of nurture and nature in terms of leadership. Faith, tell me, how were you nurtured into a leader? And what roles did mentorship play in you becoming a leader?
That's a good question. One thing, first, experience is the best teacher. And I always tell myself, if I go through pain, I can't go through it in vain, right?
Yeah.
So if I go through pain, I want to make sure I get what God is trying to teach me in that certain moment. So that's what every leader should do. When you go through experiences, you go through uncomfortable moments, you go through when your leadership skills are insulted or whatever, making sure that you're learning in that moment what God is trying to teach you. And also, mentorship plays a big part because those are the people that tell you the truth. You always need those kind of people in your circle. It's not everybody. You don't need people that are yes men. That's what I call them. Yes men. Yes. Oh yeah, that's good. That's good. That's good. You need people to be honest with you oh yeah, what you said was rude, or maybe you need to tweak how you said this, or maybe sometimes, change your presentation style, or people that would give you feedback, that helps you grow as a leader and nurture the gifts that God has placed in you. We're not an island. You can't do everything by yourself.
Right.
Like, that's why God places people around you. So I have those certain people in my life who are at higher up than me, who have gone through what I've gone through. They advise me when I'm angry and I want to do something stupid, or so many things.
Thank you, Faith. I'm happy to hear about those experiences. Toby, tell me about someone who has nurtured you. How have you been nurtured into being a leader?
For me, there's been many people that I can name that have nurtured me. I've been through so many experiences where people have taught me to do certain things, taught me how to succeed. But the one person I would say is my mother. Me being raised by a single mother, she's really strived for me to do my best, me to be successful, and for me to be a leader, not to trust just myself, but for my younger brother, for others, for people around me, because it can show that being raised by a single mother doesn't have to stop you from being a leader. You shouldn't let, like we said earlier, any title stop you from being a leader. Nothing should stop you from being a leader. If you let something as strong as labels, titles, or anything like that stop you from being a leader, then you're not fit to be a leader.
Right. That was powerful. That was powerful. And, we all know that saying that it takes a village to grow us and to raise us and everything. So I wanted to ask you, Tal, about mentorship. How is that important? How do you identify good mentors and leaders, apart from just our family and things like that?
Yeah, mentorship is very important. As everyone has pointed out, even in my personal life, I've had mentors along the way. I still have mentors right now. And in identifying a mentor, I think the first thing that I'll say to someone that wants to be mentored, the mentee, is that you have to have the desire and the yearning to be mentored. So if you have like growth areas that you think I need to improve on, or you just want to be a better person, once you have that desire, you begin to identify other people that can nurture those specific areas in your life. And another thing you also have to, be willing to do, we all come with preconceived ideas and, stance concerning other things, but you have to be willing to unlearn and to relearn, and also to learn. So you have to be willing to be teachable and pliable. So mentorship is something that is huge, but I think a lot of people sometimes try to shy away from it because of the accountability that is involved, in mentorship. So that's what I would say to you. The first thing is the yearning, the desire to be mentored, the willingness to be mentored, to be open-minded, to unlearn certain things, relearn, and to just be willing to see where that goes. Of course, mentors also is very important, that the mentors are open and, willing to also unlearn and relearn, to be open-minded and basically hear each other out. So it's a relationship that works both ways.
Right. And I really like how you mentioned that we have to be teachable. We have to be ready to learn and to hear. And, you, Kiki, as a teacher, what would you have to say to other teachers and to other mentors? What role are they going to play in developing kind and strong leaders?
Yeah, so there is a very big role that mentors and teachers have to play. But also just to add a little bit to what Tola just talked about, for young people trying to be mentored, you have to come with humility. Humility is key, because you have to be able to come to someone and accept that you're trying to get somewhere. And a lot of times you should pick a mentor who is very likely at the place that you're trying to get to, who's seen, the difficulties along the way and is able to guide you and share their experiences with you. And that's, what teachers, and mentors, that's what it should all be about, is sharing your experiences. We all go through things for so many reasons. And a lot of times we always focus on, well, I've gone through this experience so I could learn from it. But we have to remember that we go through things not just so we can learn from it, but also so we can teach other people and help them avoid making the same mistakes that we've made. So that should be one of the key focus areas when it comes to mentorship.
Right, and so it's this cycle that, we grow, we develop into leaders, then we give that back to other people and just keep on growing and continuing the cycle of leadership and growth. Awesome, thank you. So still on this topic of nurturing leadership, Faith, what would you say about the role that older adults can play in nurturing leaders? What else can they be doing?
That's a good question. I think it's very important that the older leaders pass the baton correctly, if I'm making sense.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like a lot of younger leaders feel very shut down in churches where there are older leaders. So making the younger leaders feel welcoming their leadership styles. With newer generation, there's different kind of leadership styles and different ways they think. It might not be what they're used to, but there's beauty and diversity. So welcoming what they have to say, allowing, their ideas in, and also correcting in love. We're very sensitive. We like to say we're not, but we are. And it's important that they don't get, we don't get driven away because of like one correction that we felt like didn't come the way we wanted it to. So.
Right. Yeah, I think it's really important that all the students, all of us leaders growing right now feel like we have this opportunity to express our leadership and to be leaders. Thank you. So now just really quickly, starting with you, Tala, just share like a couple seconds, your final words on leadership and what you have to say to everyone watching.
Okay, to the young people watching, leadership involves responsibilities as well as accountability. So I encourage you to start by leading yourself, be responsible, the decisions you make, and find someone to be accountable to, and just, work on being the best that you can be.
And you, Kiki?
Yeah, my message to the young people out there is don't shortchange yourself and start out in your early life and career by saying, I don't have what it takes to be a leader. Each and every one of us, we have the ability to become a leader. We have the ability to grow into a leader. All you have to do is, number one, trust in God, take the right steps, find a mentor, and do everything you need to do to grow into that role.
Toby, thank you. Toby?
Two things I'd like to say is, to number one, nobody's perfect. Don't try to build this perfect image of yourself. And number two, don't compare yourself to anybody. If you let comparisons limit who you are, then you're not really ready to take the next step as being a leader, or the first step in being a leader, which is leading yourself and guiding one's true person.
And lastly, Faith?
My message is actually to the older leaders. I think for the new generation of leadership that will come in to the church, or wherever, I think it's important to welcome them. And one thing the Holy Spirit's put in my mind is David. When David came with his version of leadership, the older people laughed and they thought it was stupid, but it actually worked out. So it's important that they let younger leaders speak up in rooms, so we feel like this is a safe space for our ideas to grow and be welcomed in.
Right. Thank you so much. And I just want to share something, especially to middle schoolers and high schoolers. I think one of the most important things you can do during these times is to be proud of who you are. Own yourself. Be proud of who you are. Be proud of your identity. And as you grow into leadership, that identity and who you are is going to show forth. Remember, everyone watching, that you have a why. There's a reason why you're here. You have a value. You have worth. Leadership will not always be easy, but it's worth it. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so glad to have you here. We hope you've taken something away from us. Now, if you ask the question, all of those questions will be answered on Sunday at Pulse at 11 a.m. Thank you so much. Have a blessed day.